Welcome to the midweek mailbag here on Pride of Detroit Podcast Network, we'll call it. My name is Jeremy Reisman. I'm the manager over at Pride of Detroit. You can find me at Detroit Online. With me, as always, to answer your questions live here on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit is the managing editor of Pride of Detroit. You can find him at Eric Schlitt on Twitter. It's Eric Schlitt. Hey, buddy.
How's it going?
We're hanging in there, Eric, aren't we? I think that's probably the best way to put it.
I hate losses. Hate losses.
They're rough, and when it comes like that week did, where, I don't know, it's not that a win was necessarily expected, but you came into that game almost more worried about the offense just because of all the injuries, and you're like, we know the defense is bad, we know the Seahawks offense is maybe better than their points per game indicated, but I don't think anyone expected that. I don't think anyone expected the Lions to put up 45 points and never lead in that game, never even tie in that game beyond the 0-0 there. So frustrating game to watch when Jared Goff and TJ Hawkinson and Jamal Williams did everything humanly possible to keep them in that game, and yet they were always a step behind just the defense giving it away.
Or the special teams missing the kick, right?
Sure. But even the offense, like the offense converted two-point conversions. They essentially erased the special teams mistakes. They did everything humanly possible to keep them in that game, despite everyone else messing it up.
I think the part that I was the most surprised about was that Aaron Glenn didn't adjust, and that's something we've seen pretty consistently from him during his time here, right? And even at the half, I was saying to you, like, hey, they make halftime adjustments, like, all the time, right? And then, like, right. You've seen this team make halftime adjustments and find success and do better, whereas the Seattle, up until that point in their first three games, they were terrible at making halftime adjustments. And so it seemed like as long as they hung around, couple adjustments here and there, and the offense keeps clicking, then this was still a winnable game at the half. Even though they looked terrible, you expected those halftime adjustments to come, and when they didn't, that's when I think panic started to set in.
Yeah, and obviously we're recording this on Tuesday. The fire Aaron Glenn crowd has had 48 hours to get it out of their system. I mean, it's not going to happen. I don't think Dan Campbell could have made it more clear that he still believes in Aaron Glenn. And listen, we literally were on this podcast last week talking about, is it okay to be disappointed with how he started? And I think some people called it premature last week, and now not a lot of people would call that conversation premature. But I think firing is an entirely different conversation, and one I don't think we're even going to bother to get into, because one, it's not going to happen. Two, it is premature, and I think we pointed out why last week. Like this, you can say all you want about Aaron Glenn as a player developer, as someone who can teach and connect with his players. The jury is still very much out on his ability to play call and maybe even develop a game plan. Those things are new to him and something that he hasn't proved he can do on a consistent basis. And I think, I know we haven't even gotten to a question yet, but I think the thing that stuck out to me most in the negative for Aaron Glenn was his inability to call plays in critical downs. The Lions were 9, or the Seahawks were 9 of 12 on third down. Again, they were almost perfect in the red zone. And these are now, I think the Lions are last in both those categories now. They're last in third down defense. They're last in red zone defense. Those are the critical downs. And you see teams scheming up stuff like the draw play to Geno Smith was something where they caught the Lions doing something that they've been doing all season, which is over pursuing on their pass rush, leaving wide open lanes. And then, the amount of times they go man to man. Well, when you do that, you leave your quarterback kind of unattended for, because everyone else has got their back turned. So I don't know. It feels like they're getting out-coached on those critical downs, because you watch that game and the Lions defense had that backed up a lot. Like, they were in 3rd and 15s. They were in 2nd and 20s, 2nd and 25s. And the Lions just could not close out those drives, could not get off the field. The opportunities were all over the place, but on those critical downs, it seemed like the Seahawks were one step ahead.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that I want to talk and like expand off of what you just said. Like, I don't even know which way to go, to be honest with you. So I don't know, maybe we should get some questions,
Yeah.
because you made a lot of good points, but I'm sure a lot of them questions are gonna come up too. So
Thank you for keeping me on track here. Yeah. So let's start with the one I've seen a couple places. Iffy. Why have we not seen more Ifatu Melifonwu? Why do they start rookie Kirby Joseph in his first career NFL action? Not just first career start, his real first career defensive action, I should say. So yeah, let me throw that to you. Why haven't we seen Iffy yet through 4 weeks?
because he's adjusting to playing safety would be my guess.
Yeah.
And he I mean, he didn't really have a training camp. He missed half the spring.
Yeah.
And it's in the middle of a position switch. So it's not surprising that even though Kirby is only got a year of starting experience, he's been playing the position for 3. And so it's a little bit more, I think, it's a little easier to go with him. He also has a more translatable skill set that complements Elliott as well, right? He can be that single high. He has the speed and the range to do that. We've yet to see that from Iffy just because he's been injured, right? So I think that's really what it came down to. Obviously, they had a competition, and obviously, Kirby looked better, and so he gets a start.
I guess the question now is, with Dan Campbell saying this week, we're gonna change some personnel around. We're gonna shift some guys off. Do you think if he finds a role somewhere in this defense, do they maybe consider pushing him back to corner with maybe the struggles that Amani's going through, or I don't know, do they do more 3 safety sets and find a way to just get him on the field?
Maybe. I mean, it's possible.
Yeah.
They could go so many different ways. It's kind of crazy to me. My kind of assumption on the spots that have looked the weakest have been slot coverage.
Yep.
And that interior defensive tackle. I think running with those 2 nose tackles isn't doing anything, because they're not. I mean, I don't even know if they're holding their ground. They're definitely not getting laterally. The nose tackles like Bugs and Benito Jones. And so those are my guesses, is that you're going to change how that front looks. You may even change and have them 2 gap a little bit more, which is going to put a little bit more pressure on your linebackers, which is a little scary. But my guess is it's going to be the how the front looks, and then that kind of nickel coverage. I went back to watch the game, and I was like on the second play, and I was already like, oh my gosh, Mike Hughes, what are you doing?
Yeah.
And so and it's little stuff. Like, okay, the play that that I'm referring to here, he sets up, they run 2 wide receivers to the right, and he sets up on that side with Oria, and you can see him pre-play turn and look to Amani, and they've connected. They're communicating pre-snap. When the play unfolds, they also have over top safety with Kirby. And when the play unfolds, immediately Amani is already starting to bail, because he's taking deep outside leverage, and Kirby has deep inside leverage. And so Mike basically just has to pass off whichever guy's going deep. So he holds his ground. They both run. One turns, the outside guy turns to the outside, the inside guy goes. But I don't know why he does this, but he turns with the inside guy. And so now all 3 guys are looking at the inside. Then he recognizes, oh, I'm on the wrong guy, and turns and bails. But by that point, you've given up an 8-yard reception. And
Right.
like, you saw stuff like this a lot. And so when you're talking about miscommunications and misassignments and not trusting each other, like, those things are part of it, because in this system, you look at the guy and you say, I'm going to pass my guy off to you. And when he does that, you don't turn with him. You now you have to loop all the way around to try and get back to your guy. Like, and there's little things like that, but they create separation. Those separations create easy plays. And then they just started they did that all game. And that's a frustrating thing. And I know I'm picking on Hughes, but there's they're guilty of that at different spots throughout the defense as well.
Yeah, and Dan Campbell went on 97, won the ticket today, and talked. He talked about the secondary and said something like, these guys these guys haven't been playing together very long at all. Basically, everyone who's out there right now wasn't out there at the end of last year. Like, every single person, and that's something I hadn't really thought about. Like, yeah, That's true. Like every single guy that's out there basically wasn't part of Lions secondary at the end of last year. But that excuse can only get you so far, right? A lot of these guys have been working together pretty much all training camp, and
Yep.
to see the communication breakdowns, the lack of trust in each other, just misreads, things like that. We're past that first month, fellas. And Aaron Glenn said last week, you know who you are by week 4. Well,
Mm-hmm.
secondary's not looking too good right now, and I think you're right on top of the defensive line stuff as well, and that's why Campbell said it sounds like we're gonna get some Demetrius Taylor this week for the first time. The question is, who does that come at the expense of? And I think everyone is itching for it to be Michael Brockers, and maybe it is, but he's not even out there that much.
Right. Yeah. If anything, it's the other nose tackles that are hurting you, right?
Yeah.
Like, um, I know I said like they might go to more two gapping, but the thing is you found something in Aline by putting him at the 3. And so I could see them switching to 2-3 techniques
Yeah.
instead of, and kind of moving away from that nose and just, I know a lot of people are saying they're going to be less aggressive, less attacking, less one gapping. I could see them actually going the opposite and trying to spread them out a little bit more and try and get guys in there that actually can penetrate, because that's what they're lacking right now.
Yeah, no question. Definitely getting a lot of defensive questions today, and maybe that's all we're going to talk about because honestly, there's not a lot of questions on offense. The offense is rolling. Let's go to this one because Josh Paschal will be returning to practice this week according to Dan Campbell. We won't see him probably on the field until a week or two after the bye, maybe after the bye, but probably a little bit more than that. I lost. Oh, there it is. Probably going to be a long theme for question today. But how much could the return of Paschal help the defense as a whole, or are we just overvaluing the shiny new toy? And we could probably throw Jerry Jacobs into this conversation as well, honestly, who also will return to practice this week, but probably not expected to return until after the bye.
With Paschal, you're getting an elevated version of Kaminsky, which they're lacking right now. And that is a massive appeal to that defensive line because it will allow you to move Aiden into better spots. It will allow you to not have to face double teams every time, right? So getting Paschal back is low-key a pretty important move. And I know everybody's fascinated by Jerry and everybody thinks Jerry's going to come in and knock Amani off, or maybe Mike Hughes is the guy that's a little bit more vulnerable, right? Yeah. Even though you got Chase Lucas there, who maybe ready, maybe not. I don't know. The potential's there. But I think, Jerry is going to bring a spark. Jerry's a guy that this coaching staff trusts, and I think he'll battle. I don't think he's just going to walk in and knock Amani off, though. I mean, that's, even though I know that's what people are clamoring for, but low key, I think Paschal is a much bigger ad because he opens up what they can do on that defensive line, and that has a ripple effect.
Yeah, I mean, the question is just how quickly can he hit the ground running, right? Because he hasn't practiced since OTAs, and we're talking about a rookie here, so it's going to take a while for him to acclimate. And the question is also, how quickly can he acclimate in practice to earn the coaching staff's trust to be out there? Is it, Green Bay after, which I believe is the game after the Cowboys? Is it after that, which I'd have to pull up the schedule here, Dolphins or something like that? It's Cowboys, Dolphins, Packers, Bears. So I mean, I think if you're being optimistic, maybe that Dolphins game. I mean, I guess it's possibly Dallas, but
sure.
I don't know. There's that bye week. It's not like they're practicing during the bye week, though.
Yeah. I mean, you might get some of the guys coming off injury trying to rehab a little bit, but yeah, they're not running walkthroughs or anything like that. But again, I think you're talking about 10, 15 snaps a game. So I think he can give that to you. You know what I mean? If you come in and you say, hey, look, I know you're not going to learn the whole defense at this stage, but if you have these 10 or 15 snaps and we're going to ask you to do this job and you just do your job and don't worry about the rest, I think that's a way that he can be impactful. And then you can take move Aiden, and then you can expand what he does because he's a guy who's been here and walking through things and he's more flexible like that. So I think you started out small, but you can still have a big impact in that small dose.
The other question, and a lot of people are asking about it in our live chat here, is what about Kaminsky? Because they didn't put him on IR when he injured himself in week 1. Is that right? Week 1 or no, week 2? Week 2. So that, I mean, mathematically speaking, seems like they would expect him to be back pretty soon Maybe he's one that misses this Patriots game and is ready for Dallas. So now what happens when you have Kaminsky and Paschal in the lineup?
It's all the better. Just allows you to be even more flexible.
Right? Yep.
Yeah, right. Because now you can get now you can if you can add Paschal on one side, Kaminsky at like a 3, Elim at a nose, Aiden at another 3, and then another edge rusher, and then you can run 5.
Yeah.
I mean, that can be like your NASCAR. Like you can put an Aquara on one side or a Harris, like, and you just have, when you have 3 guys that can play inside outside and you're lacking pressure on the inside, well, move those guys inside more. And if you get them inside more, you get them matched up against guards, you get better opportunities for penetration and to get home. So yeah, the fact that they have an IR'd him is really surprising to me. Sure. I mean, especially after a surgery.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I felt the same way about Jonah too. And at this point, it seems like maybe it would have made more sense to put IR on Jonah. He's already missed 4 games, and I don't feel like he's probably not going to play this 5th game either, but
you listen to him talk and he's saying he thinks he can come back before the bye, but then you also hear him say, yeah, I can't bend my finger yet. And right. for two people who have recovering hand injuries, we know that's not how that works, right? Like
you don't just wake up one day and it's like, oh, I can bend it now and it's fine.
It takes a while. And so the fact, that he didn't go on IR, that was a bit surprising to me as well. Now, I mean, look, there are new IR rules where you can only return 8 players from IR, but look, they've as far as IR goes, you've only got 3 guys on IR, and who knows if Vitai's coming back? Who knows if Levi's coming back? So, Tracy's not. Right. So, Kramer is really your only guy that's going to take one of those 8 spots. So it does seem a little bit unusual to not IR either of those guys but that tells you that they're anticipating that they're back, maybe by that Dallas game, maybe by the Dolphins game. I feel like this roster could be completely different by the Dolphins game.
Right. While we're kind of on the topic of these injured guys that are on reserve lists, a couple of people asking about JMO.
Yeah.
Because Dan Campbell talked about a bunch of these guys on IR or, PUP or whatever. JMO was kind of left off that conversation for whatever reason. And I think some fans are now concerned that he's not as close to returning as maybe they thought. We've seen videos of him highlight, on the practice field, cutting, and you and I even saw him doing some of that on the field on Sunday. So I guess what's your read on that? Do you think maybe we should temper expectations and maybe we don't see him till after Thanksgiving?
I'm starting, this is a very open coaching staff.
Yeah.
At the same time, some of the messages we've been getting from them the last couple of weeks have made me pause a little bit. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because Dave Fitt basically came out and was like, yeah, I'm not worried about Seibert. He's going to be fine. He's going to play. Everything's great. He's going to be out there today. And then he's like, no practice, no game.
Right.
And it's like, oh, okay. So Dave Fitt lies. And no, I'm just kidding. No, but I mean, I don't know if it's just them looking glass half full, or if it's, I wasn't asked directly, so I'm not going to answer that directly. And if you read his answer on the JMO question, he was like, well, I think Kabinda's ahead of those 3 guys that you mentioned.
Right.
So he kind of skirted past actually addressing it. And I think that might have been purposeful because honestly, they may not want to let anybody else know when JMO's coming back, or maybe he's not as far along. They don't want to rile people up. It's hard, but I think until Campbell gets a question of, tell me where Jameson Williams is, I don't think you're going to get a direct answer.
Dan Campbell does not lie very often in front of the podium. In fact, sometimes he reveals too much.
Yes.
But I think you're absolutely on point that he sometimes purposefully omits things, because sometimes he'll list guys before we're on Wednesday press conference before practice. He starts listing guys that aren't going to be at practice, and then he just omits one glaring one. It's just oh, Aiden Hutchinson isn't here. Why didn't you tell us about that? well, now we're not gonna talk to Dan Campbell until Friday.
Friday.
Yep. And so I feel like he plays. I think you're right. I think he plays some of those games, and I'm also when it comes to JMO, I am not that for some reason, even though he didn't make it sound great on Monday, I feel like maybe there is something at play here, because I mean, I don't think they're going to activate him this week in terms of getting him to practice. I don't think he'll return to practice until after the bye week, maybe a little bit afterwards. But I think he is pretty close, and I think they do want to get him. I don't think this is a case where it's like, oh, we're not going to see Jameson Williams in his rookie year. They decided that behind the scenes, and they're just not telling anybody. I think they want to see him out there, and I know there's also the kind of this other narrative among the fans like, well, do we need Jameson Williams? This team's putting up 35 points a game. Like, how much higher is the ceiling? How much? And let's answer that question. Like, what does Jameson Williams bring to this offense that is already number 1 in the league in scoring?
It's just going to stretch the defense further out, right? Like, I don't know how many can you. You're not going to have like 3-and-out problems a lot. You're going to also run into defenses that are better than the last couple that we've seen. So you're going to need a guy like him if you're going to. So he just you just want more. You want everything at your disposal that you can get. And if he doesn't catch a ball, he still may clear out like 2-3 guys because he's running a deep route that they have to adjust for. And so, Adam, I know they can do it without, but do it with them too. Like, put up 45 on a better defense with the Jameson Williams, right? So
I mean,
that's all right, man.
You got to imagine it not only clears up the middle of the field for guys like Amon-Ra, for guys like TJ, who, credit to Ben Johnson is already finding ways to get those guys open anyways. And credit to those guys. I don't want to take away from their individual performances, but you have to imagine it eventually, if he starts beating teams over the top, well, suddenly they're going to be in a too high shell for the rest of the game. And then you feed your running game, and that gets even better.
I think Swift is pretty good at getting yards above expectations, right? We saw that chart today. Did you see that one?
I did, where
he's like, everybody's here, and he's like all the way up there.
Yeah, it's like the Aaron Donald pass rush chart, where he's just like in a completely different era of everyone else. But like, hell, apparently Jamal Williams can also get a lot of yards after contact because he surprised me on Sunday in a very good way.
That run that he had for a touchdown, the second one, the one where he went right, cut loose, he wasn't touched. The blocking was so good. He wasn't touched for 12 yards. And then the defender didn't touch him. He touched the defender, and then he wasn't touched again. Like, he literally, the only contact he had was him putting his hand into the mask of that guy and putting him on the ground. And I was like, holy Jesus. Like, it was just, I want to see more running. I just do, because like, there's so much more that comes from being able to run the ball, and you've got to keep this defense off the field as much as possible. And if you can control the ball in addition to putting up 35, 45, 55 points, whatever they're going to end up doing, like, that's all the better.
Yeah. All right. We're going to take a break here. When we come back, answering more of your questions live here on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit if you want to join us every Tuesday afternoon. But we'll be right back answering more Lions questions here on the Pride of Detroit Midweek Mailbag.
Maybe we can answer more than 2 questions this next segment.
Probably not.
Sorry.
No, it's not just your fault. I talked for 5 minutes before we even answered a question. Chris Shepard, thank you for the 14 months. Says, I love this series. Thanks, Eric and Jeremy. Appreciate that. Bearded Satantzilla, thank you for the follow. I get a feeling I know where you came from. Justin Singer, thank you for the 13 months, just over a year. Appreciate it. We can answer a couple quick questions here in break mode here as well. D-Man asks, great show, guys. Do you feel Brad Holmes undervalues kickers?
No.
I definitely don't want to put special teams talk on the podcast, so we can talk about it.
I don't think he does. I think it's his money. I mean, like, there was a lot of fingers being pointed at Brad Holmes after the loss, saying he hasn't added enough talent.
Yeah.
And at the same time, that was because he was adding talent in other spots, right? Like he only
Sure.
has so much resources available to him.
Yep.
And they didn't have the cap. I know everyone is mad about the whole Prater thing, and I get it. I think re-signing Prater would have been great, but that would also been a few $1 million less than what you would have had, and they're already tied up against it. They were tied up against it last year. They had to do reconstructions last year. They already had to do contract reconstructions this year. So like those little couple $1 million matter. That's why when everyone's talking about like, can they add Ndamukong Suh? And I don't know where they're going to get $10 million to do that. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it just doesn't like work. So the cap is a big issue. The resources are a big issue. And so I think it just became I don't have the money to spend at this position when I'm spending money completely overhauling a roster. And it's crazy because we've been talking for years now about how this looks like a 3-year rebuild. And the fact that I like that your glass is blending in with
Oh
your
yeah,
green
we
screen.
call it my invisible glass.
Nice. And then I lost my train of thought because that totally threw me off. Oh, so like, but we got a little taste of like how good they could potentially be, and now everybody's hungry, and everybody's and we're all kind of, I think, getting to a point where we want it to happen now. When realistically, they got 2 more first-round draft picks. They got a whole bunch of other like another offseason before they're probably going to be consistently good. So I think the kicker, I mean, I went on a tangent about the kicker here, but like I think it's just they just haven't had the money. They haven't had the resources to try and invest in the way that they, maybe would have liked to.
Can I also say this? Like, I don't think Austin Seibert's that bad.
I don't think Riley Patterson was that bad. I thought that I was, I liked him quite a bit, and then he got out kicked.
And that's the thing that I feel like people really don't. And I got into it a little bit on Twitter last night, but it's just if you watched all of those practices, they were really neck and neck in terms of their consistency, and not really in a good way, but not god awful. And you look at their stats this year, and I know Riley Patterson's doing an okay job over there in Jacksonville, but he's not doing. I mean, he's missed one kick, and it was from 30-something yards. And if you look at all of his individual kicks, they're like 23, 23, 25, 35, 36. And then he does have a 52-yarder, which I'll be honest, I'm a little surprised because Riley Patterson cannot consistently kick 50-yard field goals. He just can't. Like, he doesn't have the leg.
I think his career high was 51, if I'm not mistaken, going back to college even.
Yeah, and last year with the Lions, he didn't kick a single one over 50. I think he missed the one attempt that 50, he took.
54, right? Or 54 or 55, something.
And I think his limit is like right around there, like 52, 53, 54, and then you can't get anything else out of him, and that matters. I know a lot of people are like, oh, just want consistency, but you get to the end of the game, and time's running low. Sometimes you're just gonna only have a 56-yarder to win it. Sometimes it'll be 61 yards, and you'll be in England, and you'll bounce it off of 2 field goal posts.
Rough.
But
I think another factor that people often overlook is that kickoffs are a big part of what the kicker's job is, and they do more kickoffs than field goals and extra points. Like, and Patterson was consistently like coming up short. Like he wasn't doing. He was way behind on kickoffs, even though he was a lot closer in the point opportunities. So. Yeah, and look, I mean, I kept that tracker, and you saw a lot more red in Patterson's column than you did in Seibert's, and you add in there the other parts of the job, and yeah, it's the way it went.
Seibert's longest is 53 to Patterson's 52. Yes, but do you remember what happened in the Ford Field scrimmage?
Yeah, he hit from like 60.
Yeah,
right?
Seibert hit a 60-yarder. Patterson
60 something.
Patterson literally cannot do that. Just he can't. It's not even close. So
it was 61 or 62. It was too. It wasn't just like 60. He had a couple extra on that, and it was cleared too. So
yeah. So when I say one clearly has power over the other, this isn't just a theoretical thing. Like, this is something we saw in practice. Patterson's limit, I promise you, is not much longer than 53. Seibert, if he can get it together, and listen, like, he's missed what, two. I think he's only missed 2 field goals, right? And they were both in the Minnesota game, or did he miss another one? He may have missed another one.
I think it was just Minnesota, and he only missed 2 last year.
Right.
And I mean, only played half the season, but yeah, I mean, he's not bad. He's just hurt, And look, the narrative changes when you're hurt, right? Sure. Especially when you're hurt in back-to-back seasons. All of a sudden, those misses loom large, right. And it's a lot easier to point blame when someone's not available.
Yep, and if that's what you want to focus on and say, well, Seibert's hurt, he can't stay on the field. Well, sure, but the Lions don't have a time machine. They don't know that. Unfortunately, it sounds like Seibert's injury is the same one he dealt with and had surgery with on last year. But again, we came out Monday, and we have to see if Dan Campbell was potentially lying to us. He seemed optimistic that Seibert is trending towards playing this week. So we'll see. But we'll also probably get a kicker signing either to the practice squad or something, I would imagine, in the next 24 hours.
What's the guy Dave likes?
The one where he clearly knows their agent or something.
Every time he's available, Dave tweets about him. Yeah, that guy is. He seems to be of interest.
Sure.
Right.
All right. Well, geez, that was far longer on kicker talk than I would have been happy with.
Well, you're welcome.
I'll answer one more here. Question for Offstream: how do you feel about the downfall of Stafford?
I would never want to interact with you during a Rams game where their offense is struggling.
No, I certainly don't mind it as much as I would have last year. I would say that I'm still a little bit bothered about the trash that Stafford gets on Twitter.
Sure.
But at the same time, he's not playing well. Like I'm not going to sit here and defend the way he's playing. His offensive line sucks, but you have, so what? A lot of quarterbacks deal with crappy offensive lines. You can't throw 1 pick six and almost throw 3 others. Like he was bad last night. He missed a wide open touchdown pass that, he sidearmed and it was like 3 yards wide of, I don't know who it was, but that cost him big. That cost him at least 4 points. I think they ended up kicking a field goal there. And then, he literally threw 2 picks, like 2 other passes that could have been pick sixes. And that 49ers defense is no slouch. It's a really, really good defense.
No
Maybe
way.
the best in the league.
They're number 1 in pass defense, and I think like number 4 in rush defense or something like that. Like it's ridiculous. The Niners and the Bills are just terrors, and those were the 2 games they lost, right? Just those 2. So we'll see. Hopefully they lose some more, and that helps this draft pick.
I don't mind at this point. It would be nice to have 2 top 15 picks, or at least 1. I mean, hey, hell, the Lions. I know that. I would love to see them really switch places. That's even better to me.
The draft talk is going to be coming. I've already saw questions on Twitter about it and stuff. So I mean, like there's an interesting debate that's going to come up. Like, what do you prioritize? Is Goff the answer? Yeah, because there are 2 stud defensive linemen. It may be more. We'll see how they all play out. But there are 2 studs on the defensive line, and then you have 2 potentially really good quarterbacks.
The Georgia and the Alabama guy.
So the Georgia D tackle and the Alabama edge. Yeah.
What's the DT's name? The Georgia guy. We were just talking about him in the media center.
Jalen Carter.
Jalen Carter.
Right. He's a monster.
Yeah, he was maybe the best defensive lineman on that ridiculous defensive line last year, and that saw 2 or 3 guys get drafted. In the top.
Number 1 pick.
Yeah.
Number 1 pick. And,
guy.
If Will Anderson's not in this draft, Carter is the best defender in this draft. But I mean, realistically, it might be Anderson Carter as your 1-2. And then your quarterbacks, they kind of got some flaws, but they're really good too. So, I mean, but then it's going to be a big, healthy debate over where do you invest?
Yeah.
And so I mean, and then there's some corners too. So we'll see how those go too.
And
couple of
I think we're getting into a point where it's like, okay, Jared Goff isn't the problem right now, but
Right.
I mean, and that's very much clear. Like Jared Goff is not, and if you
Hmm.
consider him a problem, it's like problem number 40 on this team.
You have him for 2 more years at 30 million each year, which is reasonable
It's
for a guy
reasonable,
who's putting up the numbers that he is.
but you
You could
you also have to wonder, um,
are you
you
going to
know,
be in a spot to take a guy?
yeah, and just I
Yeah.
think it's being a good general manager. If you're in a position to take a guy that you think is going to be not just a Jared Goff, but
Hmm.
a Patrick Mahomes, an elite guy. If you're in a position to
Hmm.
take that guy quarterback, doesn't matter that you have an above average
Hmm.
quarterback. Or is it your responsibility as a general manager to go out and get that superstar?
I don't know. It's like, who do you want? What type of game record do you want? Because like Anderson and Carter were guys that would have. I don't know if Carter would have went above Aiden last draft, but Anderson would have.
Yeah.
Anderson would have been the first pick last year. Like he just would have. Carter, maybe.
Chad is throwing out all the examples and counter examples that are at the crux of this debate, right? Like the Chiefs taking Patrick Mahomes, great example. The Packers
Yep.
taking Jordan Love, great counter example. It's I mean the Packers drafting Aaron Rodgers, positive example. Like yeah, you can pull out anything
Yeah.
and you can really paint the debate in one light, but the truth of the matter is drafting quarterbacks is a dangerous business, but it's also the most rewarding if you get it right.
Mm-hmm.
It's
It's
tough.
yeah, it's going to be an interesting debate.
Great.
Um
Draft is
S
only
S
6 months away, Eric.
well,
Six and a half.
SB Nation Reacts poll this week is going to feature Jared Goff questions. So once they decide to give me the graphic for that, then I can set
Yeah.
that poll up. But just waiting on them.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm very interested in the results from that.
I know what the predatory commenters are gonna say, but I'm not sure about the
Okay.
larger public. Anyways, all right, let's kick it back in. So continue to send some questions, guys. Again, I saw a lot of you do it in the first segment, but if you do highlight them, it's a little bit easier for me to say. So do that if you got a question. Let me get one lined up from our Twitter before so that we have one to kick things off. I see devoted to Detroit. You sent a bunch. Yeah, you said I sound like Tony on Twitter. Let me see if I can get one. Indigo, no, I don't. Oh, wait, I just paradoxed myself. Welcome back to the midweek mailbag. Myself, Jeremy Reisman, and Eric Schlitt here, live on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit, answering your questions, your burning questions, almost all of them having to do with the defense, and understandably so. So let's go right back into it. We mentioned some of the changes that we might expect on really the defensive front. Let's talk a little bit more about the secondary there, because I feel like we brushed over it a little bit. We know Amani's struggling. We know Kirby's was in there for the first time. We talked a little about Iffy, but do you think there are other guys there in the back seven, maybe specifically at in the secondary, that could have an opportunity come Patriots week?
I really think Akuda's safe, Elliott's safe, and it sure seems like they're ready to start investing in Kirby, which means that leaves Owarie and Hughes the most vulnerable. I don't think they're going to change Malcolm Rodriguez's role. It would
Right.
be a little surprising if they changed Ancelone's role, but I would not rule it out.
Yeah. Yeah, why not?
Anzalone had a tough game. So I do think Anzalone, Hughes, Oruwariye could all be, I mean, they could all be in there or they could all be potentially vulnerable.
The linebacker issue is interesting to me because the thing that Dan Campbell keeps saying over and over again, that the problem with the team right now is that they're not, one player is not doing his job, and that's creating a snowball effect where someone is trying to compensate, and it's building mistrust between players, and then everyone is losing confidence. Anzalone doesn't strike me as that kind of guy. He strikes me as a guy who's mostly sound in his assignments, which means I don't think he's talking about him, even though Anzalone isn't playing particularly. I mean, they put that guy in front of the podium because they love him, because I think the coaching staff trusts a guy like Anzalone over pretty much everyone else. But at the same time, they're still doing a lot of interesting linebacker rotation that kind of like we didn't see Derek Barnes for 2 weeks, and then suddenly he gets 20, 30 snaps or whatever it was on Sunday. Chris Board is all over the place, I think, with his snap distribution. So I'm not sure where they're going there.
My idea on what their plan is that you've got Anzalone's the Mike, Rodrigo's the Will.
Yep.
And then when one of those two guys in their base set is not available, Barnes is the next guy up. When you want a sub package guy, that's when you go to Board. Right. And that's kind of like what it's looked like to me. Like when Malcolm had to exit, it was Barnes that came in to fill in for him, not Board, right? Because I think he gives them more what they want in their base set. Now, with the base set changing, who knows where they want to go with this, right? But I could see this defense starting to shift towards Malcolm being the guy who doesn't leave the field. As right now, Anzalone is the guy who doesn't leave the field. Malcolm plays about 80%.
Do you make him in the mic?
You don't have to.
Yeah.
You don't have to.
Okay.
You can keep him at the Will. You can still have him relay calls from the Will if you want him to relay calls. You can, but I wouldn't be surprised if they started to scale Anzalone back a little bit. The problem is that you would like Barnes, and Barnes seems like that guy to step up. But is he ready? Is he performing? Is he doing? Who knows? I'm not seeing it. Right.
Yeah. Like I said, he has to earn it. You can't just do it. He has to earn it.
And Board seems like a sub package guy right now.
Right.
And I need to go back and rewatch a couple of his snaps, but I thought he lost contain on one of those end of runs, right?
Yep. The game sealer, pretty much.
Right. And so like when they went, so it was interesting to like how they're approaching it. I actually am not sure if they're going to change it up too much. I do think they might scale, like I said, switch how they're scaling the guys.
Sure.
But you can see like just even on the first play of the game, if you just rewatch the first play of the game, Malcolm takes his guy into coverage and he runs him up and he's completely taken out. And then Anzalone bites on the run, and then he's late to get out to this coverage to the tight end. Now it was a misaligned like formation and stuff. They had a tight end in the backfield and everything, but like Anzalone's job's a little bit harder.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think Malcolm's going to step into that job. Malcolm's great where he is.
Right.
But can Barnes make that a better decision in that situation? I don't know. Right. Like that's the tricky part about where they're at with their linebackers. I still think Hughes is the guy that I'm looking at saying, man, there's just so many little things like, why are you turning inside instead of turning outside? Why are you not passing guys when you're supposed to? Why are you in trail? And then look, you hurt them when you put them in man coverage all the time, as well. Like you got to be able to switch things up, and maybe Glenn can do that, and maybe that helps. But Hughes looks to me to be like the guy who he made the most mistakes that I've seen recently.
But I think the problem there is like, who do you replace him with? Do you bring up AJ Parker? I mean, those two were kind of neck and neck in camp. Maybe that's the guy. I know what you want to happen. I
don't think they're going to turn to Chase. I don't think they're going to put two rookies.
Right.
I don't think they're going to put two rookies in that secondary and just hope and think that that's going to get better. Like that's going to get better long term.
Right. But probably worse in the short term. Right.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Like that's hard because they're going to stack receivers on that side and then you're going to have and essentially that's Kirby, on the right side, and then that's where Kirby is,
Right.
and then you're going to have two guys, stacked on each other that are both rookies, and that until they get their experience up, that's a hard ask for them to be a better option. Now, look, I love Chase. I think he's potential's through the roof. I think he's a better player. I think he's communications better. He trusts his assignment. He does what he's supposed to do. And if they go to him, I would love it. And no, but 100%,
Yeah.
100%. How many times did we watch him out on the field and say, he's calling out the plays before you know it. He's not even looking at anybody else. He's just doing his job, and he's shutting his guy down. Now, he's still making mistakes because he's a rookie, and that's fine, but he understands what's going, and he trusts that his teammates are going to do what they're supposed to do. So wouldn't be surprising, but it would be a little surprising.
What about the other corner position? Do you think Amani is in any real trouble of losing?
Not until Jerry comes back.
Yeah.
No, I mean, like, they could put Will in, but
they like Will.
What's Will good? They
but
do.
But I think you're right. I think they really like Amani, right? Because Aaron Glenn came out last week and says, "Listen, I did not lose any faith in Amani, despite all the the 6 penalties that he put, because that's not the Amani that I see out there every day. That was the aberration." Well, now he's stacked 2 bad games on top of each other. So at what point are you like, okay, well, maybe I was wrong about Amani. Maybe Amani's just not feeling right. Maybe it's the back issue. Maybe it's his confidence level. Maybe he's not working well with the safety over top. Whatever it is, what's the breaking point there with Amani where you have to be like, okay, he's hurting us too much. We need to look elsewhere right now.
Well, it has to be, if he's not getting it from a mental standpoint, like he's not processing the play properly. For example, Orlovsky put a tweet out today where where they went 0 and they just blitzed everybody. And I don't care. If you want to run 0 every once in a while, that's fine. And like, you can argue the timing of the play call, but whatever. But on that play, Amani has Lockett, and he has Lockett on the right side. Amani needs to be inside coverage. With 0 like that, you have to be inside. Yeah. And he wasn't. He was outside, and he gave Lockett the inside run, and with no safety over the middle, that was an easy throw for them to make. And so either Amani thought he had safety help and he didn't, which is a potential problem, right? Which is a thing that if he's not getting that, that's a problem, right? Or he's not understanding his positioning, which is another potential problem. Like, or maybe he just made a mistake like that, and then that's correctable. But like, if he's not understanding the assignment, or if he's not positioning himself properly, those are concerning. It's hard for us to understand because what the defensive play call is. It's hard for us. We have to like reverse engineer it to try and figure out what the defensive play call is sometime. But in a situation like that where it's 0, he has to be inside because that was way too easy of a throw.
Yeah, and the idea of being on the inside is that you're using the sideline as the extra defender, right? You're forcing him to have a limited amount of space to work with.
Much harder throw. Yeah.
All right, let's move to another question here. JTS Max or JTS AMX says, "Do you think the new attacking front is the problem? I feel like the front 4 is way too aggressive at playing the run and also way too aggressive on the edge, getting too vertical and breaking contain."
Well, you saw the edge getting a little bit too high, where the tackles were just almost running them out of the play.
Yep.
I don't think it's an issue on the inside because they're really not getting interior penetration as much as they should be, unless they blitz. And so maybe calm the edges down a little bit. Maybe you have them run more inside moves, like get upfield and then come back in. Maybe you try and work that into your playbook, or you don't run them both on that arc on the same play. You purposefully have one running a different move, or you stunt them or something. Like, there's lots of different things that you can do, but there were a couple times that the edges were just going straight upfield, the interior was just holding, and then the secondary was in man, and there was just nobody was getting home, and they just made their throws.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the attacking front thing, I don't think it's part of it that you have these edge guys overrunning their responsibilities. Like, that's not part of the scheme. I think that's just the players making a mistake, right? There's no way you want your edge guys to just like you said, be getting too high where they're just
Yeah.
running past quarterbacks. That's not part of it. I think especially given how important the run game is to this coaching staff, there's no way they like, oh yeah, just lose contain. Like that's not what's happening here. And so I don't know how much is to blame on the attacking scheme, but it, you know, listening to Dan Campbell today, it did sound like maybe that's something that they are gonna scale back on. You know, that's the other
Mm-hmm.
thing that besides the personnel changes, he said, we do need to scale back some things, make things a little bit easier so that these guys can stop overthinking and just kind of play. And it's hard to know what that actually means in terms of X's and O's because
Mm-hmm.
Campbell's being purposely vague about it, just like he's been vague about some of the personnel changes that are there. But I think part of it is just going to be, you, you have to have some gap integrity, and it goes back to trusting your guys that that you're not overdoing what you're doing to compensate for anyone else. So I don't know if like the overall scheme is necessarily the issue, but there's certainly going to be tweaks in there because I mean there's no other way to put it than that what they're doing right now is just not acceptable. Lantana says, last week you said losing against the Seahawks would be more worrying. With that in the books, are you even more concerned for the Patriots away game now? I'm trying to remember that exact comment. I don't remember it off the top of the head, but I guess the question was, would you be more concerned losing to Seattle or losing to New England? And yeah, I mean, anytime you drop a home game to a subpar opponent, that's pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, you need this Patriots game for a lot of. I mean, again, I'm never talking must-win games in the first half of the season, but you're going to lose the fans very quickly if you lose this game, especially since it means a little bit extra to them to get back at Patricia. You're going to lose more confidence in the players going into the bye at 1-4, and you're already talking about a defense that doesn't look confident out there. That's Dan Campbell's words. So the defense doesn't look confident. You go in 1-4, and especially if the defense doesn't look any better against a Patriots team that is struggling. I mean, they're starting to find their offensive identity. They're a hell of a running team, but they could very well be trotting out a third string quarterback. Yeah, if some of that stuff doesn't settle down, this would be a pretty humongous loss.
You also have a couple really good opponents coming out of the bye, which is potentially troublesome as well, right? So, yeah, because if you go down to 1-4 and then you have two opponents and then you end up 1-6, it's gonna. I mean, the pitchforks are gonna be out, right? So I do think it's an important game, and I think for a lot of the reasons that you highlighted, but I think it's also going to be a much harder game than what you just than the opponent. Like there's a lot of analysts out there that still think Detroit is a better team than Seattle. They just didn't find a way to get it done, right?
Sure.
So yeah, I'm more worried about this team. To go back to the original question, I'm more worried now after losing to Seattle than I was like the week prior, right? And so I'm a little bit more worried about the next opponent. And if they lose again, then I'm going to be a little bit more worried about the next opponent after that too. So
is it fair to say though, like I know we're talking about a Patriots offense that literally is first in run offense DVOA. They're really good at running the ball, but I feel like that kind of offense plays a little bit better into the Lions' strengths. I know they haven't been great at defending the run lately, but I feel like a one-dimensional offense like that where you don't really have to worry that much about the Patriots beating you over the top. They don't have a lot of good receivers, and like I said, they might be on their third-string quarterback. I feel like the Lions can key in on that and be better. They don't have to worry against. I don't think Bailey Zappi is a very mobile guy, and if it's not him, I don't think any of the other guys. Mac Jones isn't mobile. Brian Hoyer not mobile. Like I feel like this is kind of a one-dimensional offense, and that should make the Lions' defense job a lot easier, and I think that's something that they can be okay at.
I think, yeah. I mean, I'm with you. The run is the biggest concern, and I think Jacoby Myers he was injured last week. I don't know if he's still going to be injured. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We'll have to see how the injury report plays out. But if you're missing a couple of weapons, that hurts as well. it's a game I think they're really going to have to like dig down and find a way to win that game, even if it's ugly. And if it means running the ball more themselves to try and keep I mean, look, if both these teams are running the ball and they're both focused on running the ball, this could be a low possession game. Sure. And if it's a low possession game, that's not the worst thing in the world for the Lions, because the Lions, they know how to score. They know how to finish when they, if they're running, they're finding success, they find the end zone. And so low possession, find scores, walk away.
Yeah. And as Garrettson points out in our chat, like this is a unique challenge in that they finally are going up against an offense that doesn't have like this crazy duo of really good receivers. And
they have a couple of good tight ends. Sure. That's the thing they're going to have to be real sharp about.
Because they weren't very good about it. Yeah. Against the Seahawks, they were not great at it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and part of that is because I think part of their game plan was surrounded around helping with Metcalf and Lockett. But
this is a situation where I think you could see a guy like Iffy or a guy like Will Harris getting a little bit more run in the slot, because you want them matched up against those tight ends. Remember, this was initially what we had thought when we were that Iffy was going to be their tight end matchup guy. Right.
Yeah.
And so if he can be it, or if Will can be it, and you can start focusing on some of those tight ends, maybe that helps. That should help out.
All right. Last one before we go here. Interesting question here. Logan Stenberg this Sunday. And I bring this up because interesting moment towards the end of last game when Evan Brown goes down with that injury.
Yeah.
We see not Logan Stenberg step in, but is it Awosika? Is that right?
I believe so. Awosika.
Yep. He steps in at right guard.
Yeah.
So one, what do you make of that? Two, if Evan Brown can't go, what do the Lions do?
Yeah, I mean, the initial thought that we had in the press box was it's got to be because they're in a pass pro situation, right? And then when you look back at this game, so if you think, hey, if they want to be more pass oriented, maybe they go back to him again if Evan can't go. But at the same time, it's not like their pass pro on the inside was working really good last week to begin with.
True.
And if you're, and Logan can just bully people. So I still would lean towards playing Logan, because I am of the mindset of I want to run the ball. I want to control the clock. And so I would personally replace Logan if Evan Brown's not able to go. Now, Brown said in the locker room, Brown said he was going to be okay. So he wasn't overly worried. And he hung around like all the way till the end too. It's usually if you're hurt and you're hurt, you bounce out of that locker room pretty quick. Quintez Cephas, right?
Sure.
That's why I almost bowled him over trying to get to the locker room when he was trying to exit.
Yeah.
So the fact that he was hanging around, that's a pretty good sign that I think he might be all right. But I would go with Stenberg.
And to be clear, this is what Dan Campbell said about Evan Brown on Monday. He says he's got an ankle. I don't think it's long term, but it's day to day. We'll see where it is. So I don't know. Part of me sees that and like, okay, well, it's not a high ankle sprain, but it might still be an ankle sprain. Which I mean, that's what Amar and Ra's dealing with. That's what I think. Swift and Shark and all those guys. So wouldn't surprise me if Brown misses a game or two. But I don't know. Like I'm with you that I think Awosika made more sense in that situation because it was a late game and they were going to throw on every down. But I'm not sure there's not more to that as well. And so that'll be something I keep an eye on this week at practice. As Lions retake the field on Wednesday, we'll have all of that on prideofdetroit.com. We'll have our preview podcast Thursday here on twitch.tv/prideofdetroit. It'll be up on our podcast feed Friday. But until then, I think we're going to close things out here. Eric, thank you for joining me as always. We'll be back again next Tuesday around this time, 1 p.m.-ish is what we're going to try to aim for going forward. Thank you for everyone in our live audience. Thank you for everyone that is listening at home and everyone who gives reviews to the podcast. Very much appreciate all that. But until next time, it's chaos. Be kind.